The hidden connection between Islam and Judaism, Abraham's secret divided. Beneath centuries of division lies a single root, the faith of Abraham, whose hidden secret reveals that Islam and Judaism were never two paths, but one divine current fractured by time, politics, and the human heart. There was once a man who walked alone beneath the desert stars, searching not for power or land, but for the voice of the eternal. His name was Abraham, and from his solitude, two great civilizations were born. One would become the house of Israel, carrying the Torah and the covenant of a chosen people. The other, centuries later, would rise from the sands of Arabia, carrying the Quran and the message of submission to the same God. Between them runs a river of shared blood and revelation, of kinship and conflict, of divine memory and human forgetting. The story of Islam and Judaism is not merely a theological tale. It is the story of humanity's fractured search for unity. Two reflections of one truth, two heirs of a single fire. The division between them has shaped empires, faiths, and philosophies. Yet hidden beneath the noise of history lies a secret so profound it could redraw how we understand revelation itself. Abraham's original covenant was never meant to be divided. It was a blueprint for divine unity among all who seek the eternal. This is not a story of comparison or debate. It is a journey through symbols, scriptures, and civilizations, through exile and revelation, through the shared DNA of faith. To rediscover the hidden connection between Islam and Judaism is to rediscover the architecture of revelation itself, and perhaps the forgotten possibility of unity. The root in the covenant, Abraham's secret divided. The desert is the cradle of silence, the place where human ambition burns away and only the soul remains to hear. It was under that vast, wordless expanse that a man named Abraham stood alone, gazing into the constellations. He was not searching for the stars. He was searching for the voice behind them, the one rhythm that beats beneath all creation, the intelligence that whispers through every atom, the eternal be that bursts galaxies and guides hearts. The Quran remembers this moment not as mythology, but as awakening. He looked upon the stars and said, "This is my Lord," until they faded. He looked upon the moon and said, "This is my Lord," until it waned. He saw the sun and said, "This is my Lord," and until it set. And then, beyond the vanishing lights, he perceived the one that does not rise or set, the source of all light itself. In that instant, the root of revelation was planted, not in text nor in stone, but in consciousness. Abraham did not find God through ritual or inheritance. He found him through reason purified by wonder, through faith carved by solitude. His discovery was not the birth of a religion, it was the birth of remembrance. And yet, from that single moment of unity, history would unfold as a story of division. The covenant and the fracture. When the voice spoke to Abraham, it was not merely to command, it was to entrust. "I will make of thee a great nation," it said. But that nation was not meant to be bound by blood, nor geography, nor time. It was meant to be the people who preserve the covenant of oneness. But the human heart, fragile as clay, luminous as fire, could not contain such an unbroken vision. The covenant began to take form in lineage. From Abraham came Isaac, and from Isaac Jacob, who became Israel. From Abraham also came Ishmael, the outcast son, whose destiny would later echo through the desert winds until it reached the lips of Muhammad, the final prophet. Two sons, two lineages, two directions of the same divine current, Israel and Ishmael, each carrying fragments of the original light. But light, when refracted through the prism of history, becomes color, and color, when misinterpreted, becomes conflict. The division between Judaism and Islam was never born in the heavens. It was born in the interpretation of inheritance, a question not of who received the covenant, but of how it was understood. The Torah held the covenant as law, a structure to sanctify a people. The Quran held it as remembrance, a rhythm to sanctify all humanity. Yet both point back to the same root, the consciousness of unity. If Abraham were to speak again, perhaps he would not recognize the fences built in his name. He would not see Jews or Muslims, Israelites or Arabs, only his children arguing over the same well from which both were meant to drink. The hidden unity beneath the names. Names divide, essence unites. In the Torah, the divine is called Elohim, the creative power, the plural of majesty. Elsewhere, he is called Wage, the unpronounceable name, the breath between being and non-being. In the Quran, he is Allah, the all-encompassing, the one who cannot be contained by form or imagination. But beneath these sacred syllables lies a single vibration, a breath that transcends language. Both traditions speak of a God who is one, beyond multiplicity, yet immanent in every act. The Jewish Shema proclaims, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one." The Quran echoes, "Say he is Allah, one." Two sentences separated by centuries, two revelations divided by tongues, yet they mirror each other as if drawn from the same eternal ink. What divides them is not meaning, but memory. Language became the veil through which unity was fragmented. Hebrew, the tongue of covenant, became sacred to a tribe. Arabic, the tongue of revelation, became sacred to a nation. Yet both are descendants of the same Semitic root, a linguistic echo of the same divine alphabet. The letters themselves, Alif, Lam, Ha, Aleph, Lamed, He, are nearly identical, as if whispering, "You have forgotten how close you are." The mystics of both traditions knew this. The Kabbalists spoke of the Sephirot, the hidden architecture of divine emanation. The Sufis spoke of the Asma al-Husna, the beautiful names through which the infinite reveals itself. Both were mapping the same cosmos, the descent of unity into multiplicity, the dance of creation around the central flame of oneness. The prophets did not contradict each other. They harmonized. It was human pride that turned harmony into hierarchy, that sought ownership over revelation, as if truth were a territory to defend rather than a mirror to behold. The fractured inheritance. When the son of Abraham, Ishmael, was sent into the desert, it was not a punishment. It was preparation. The desert is where illusions die. It strips away the comfort of idols, the noise of civilization, the arrogance of power. There, amid emptiness, the spirit learns to listen. It was in such a place that the lineage of Ishmael would later receive the Quran, not as a replacement of revelation, but as its restoration. Meanwhile, the children of Israel carried their own burden, the weight of history, of exile and promise, of divine law and human rebellion. They were chosen not for privilege, but for responsibility, to embody divine justice within the turbulence of the world. Yet with time, their covenant too became veiled in form. The Torah became a monument, sacred, yes, but sometimes too rigid to breathe. Islam came as the echo that reawakened the melody, not to erase, but to remind. The Quran speaks to the people of the book, not as strangers, but as kin. Our God and your God is one, and to him we submit. Quran 29:46. But the human ego resists the simplicity of unity. It prefers the comfort of belonging to a tribe rather than the responsibility of belonging to truth itself. And so, the covenant was divided. One branch carried the memory of the law, the other carried the memory of surrender. But the law without surrender becomes tyranny, and surrender without law becomes chaos. Both halves were necessary, both incomplete without the other. The secret of the fire. When Abraham was cast into the fire for rejecting the idols of his people, the Quran says, "We said, O fire, be coolness and peace upon Abraham." To 21:69. This was not merely a miracle of survival, it was a revelation of metaphysics. The fire symbolizes knowledge, powerful, illuminating, but dangerous when uncontrolled. The coolness represents wisdom, the balance that transforms knowledge into light rather than destruction. In the same way, the descendants of Abraham inherited this dual fire. The children of Israel were given the fire of the intellect, a covenant of law and order, of interpretation and study. The children of Ishmael were given the fire of spirit, a covenant of remembrance, of purification and surrender. Both fires are divine. Both must be cooled by wisdom. Yet through the centuries, each lineage claimed its flame as superior. The scholars of one faith accused the other of deviation. The followers of one revelation saw the other as corruption. But in truth, they were arguing over who owned the fire, while forgetting that the fire itself belonged to God. The deeper secret, the one known only to the prophets, was that both flames were meant to unite in the human heart. The intellect without spirit becomes pride. Spirit without intellect becomes blindness. The balance of both births understanding. This was Abraham's true inheritance, not territory or genealogy, but the art of balance, the capacity to perceive unity beneath diversity. That is the covenant humanity forgot, the universal covenant. The Quran tells us that God took a covenant not just with prophets, but with all souls. Am I not your Lord? And they replied, yes, we bear witness. 7:172. That was the primordial agreement, the eternal recognition of unity before the fragmentation of time, race, or religion. Abraham's covenant was merely a reawakening of that eternal memory. To understand the connection between Islam and Judaism is to remember that revelation itself is circular. It does not begin with the Torah and end with the Quran. It is one stream, flowing through the landscape of history, adjusting to human consciousness as it evolves. Each revelation is both a continuation and a correction, a renewal of the same eternal blueprint. When the Quran calls itself a dhikr, a reminder, it implies that the truth has been known before. The Torah was the law of remembrance, the Quran, the remembrance of law. One externalized the covenant in social order, the other internalized it in the human soul. Together they form the axis of divine civilization. Justice and mercy, intellect and faith, Moses and Muhammad, Israel and Ishmael. If humanity ever learns to see this again, the divisions of history may yet heal. The forgotten name. There is a name that unites all revelation, not a word, but a vibration, a breath. The ancient mystics said that when God breathed into Adam, he placed within him the echo of his own name. That echo became consciousness, the ability to know the known and long for the unknown. In Hebrew, the name of God cannot be fully spoken. In Arabic, every prayer begins with Bismillah, in the name of God. Both languages guard the secret of divine nearness, the idea that to speak of God is to breathe his presence. What is hidden behind the names is not theological distinction, but metaphysical unity, a single truth refracted through the mirrors of time. The Jews call him the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The Muslims call him the God of Abraham, Ishmael, and Muhammad. But the God behind both genealogies is one, unchanging, eternal. When a Jew prays Shema Yisrael and a Muslim whispers La ilaha illallah, they are unknowingly speaking the same confession, the same act of surrender, the circle unbroken. The story of Abraham is the story of humanity itself, the journey from ignorance to awareness, from idolatry to insight, from division to unity. His covenant was not meant to establish tribes of believers, but generations of seekers. The true children of Abraham are not those who inherit his blood, but those who inherit his surrender. To be Abrahamic is not to belong to a category of religion. It is to belong to the eternal movement of consciousness that bows before the unseen source. And perhaps this is the secret that was lost, that Judaism and Islam were never two faiths, but two halves of a remembrance. The Torah spoke to the mind, the Quran to the heart. Together they formed the anatomy of divine revelation, intellect and intuition, structure and surrender. The covenant was never broken. It was only forgotten. But in every generation, there are those who remember, who see in the Torah the same light that burns in the Quran, who hear in the call to prayer the same yearning that beats in the Psalms. They are the inheritors of the hidden connection, the keepers of Abraham's secret, that God is one and so are we. The story of faith does not move in straight lines. It ripples, like sound through mountains, like wind across deserts. The covenant made with Abraham did not end in his lifetime. It unfolded through centuries, carried in the hearts of two brothers whose blood bound them and whose destinies would part them, Isaac and Ishmael. From their tents in the deserts of Canaan and Arabia, two civilizational rivers began to flow, one toward Jerusalem, the other toward Mecca, both reaching for the same unseen sea, the one God. But as time marched forward, that unity, once luminous, was fractured by politics, power, and pride. What began as one flame became two, and the world has lived in the twilight between them ever since. Yet deep beneath the theological disputes and historical hostilities, there remains a single current of divine intention, a hidden connection, an echo that has never fully faded. 1. The twin inheritance from one father, two paths. The Quran calls Abraham Khalilullah, the friend of God. The Torah remembers him as the first who heard God's voice in covenantal intimacy. In both traditions, Abraham is not merely a man, but an archetype, the prototype of faith, the one who stands between heaven and earth, between the seen and the unseen. When Isaac was chosen to continue the covenant through Jacob, and Ishmael was sent eastward, the division appeared to be an exile, yet it was in truth a distribution. Divine wisdom scattered Abraham's spiritual DNA across nations, so that the knowledge of the one could never be monopolized. What Judaism preserved in law, Islam rekindled in spirit. What one guarded through textual devotion, the other revived through universal remembrance. The separation was never meant as rejection, but as orchestration. God was writing through two pens upon one scroll. Isaac's descendants would cultivate the discipline of covenant, law, order, memory, priesthood. Ishmael's line would carry the fire of submission, purity, devotion, universality. Together they formed the two chambers of the Abrahamic heart. But the tragedy of history is that human hands tend to guard symbols more fiercely than meanings. And so, what was meant to complete became that which competed. The sons of one father forgot the music of the unity they once sang. 2. Exile as divine strategy, the spiritual alchemy of separation. Exile is not always punishment. Sometimes it is preparation. Every prophet, every civilization must walk through deserts to awaken the truth within them. For the children of Israel, exile became the crucible of endurance. Through Babylon, Persia, Rome, and diaspora, they learned that faith is not a geography. It is a covenant that survives loss. Out of exile came Torah, synagogue, commentary, resilience, the architecture of remembrance. For the children of Ishmael, exile took another form, not physical displacement, but historical invisibility. Arabia, the neglected corner of civilization, became the cradle of the final revelation. The desert silence became the sanctuary for divine speech. While empires glittered, God chose the forgotten sands to remind humanity of what it had forgotten: submission without intermediaries. Thus, two exiles forged two kinds of strength, memory and surrender. And when they finally met in the mirror of history, through the Quran's call and the prophet's lineage, the divine story came full circle. The Quran did not erase what came before it. It awakened what had fallen asleep. It did not compete with the Torah. It conversed with it. It did not reject the prophets of Israel. It honored them, naming them one by one, including the one through whom the law was given, Moses. In that, Islam became both a continuation and a correction, not of text, but of spirit. The Quran called humanity back to the root, beyond tribe, beyond chosenness, to the universal covenant of surrender. 3. The prophets between the mirrors. The prophets of Israel and the prophets of Arabia, in truth, they stand in one line. Each reflects a facet of the same divine light, refracted through the prism of human time. When Moses stood before Pharaoh, he spoke truth to tyranny, a moral pattern later embodied when Muhammad confronted the Quraysh. When Solomon built the temple, he sought to make the earth mirror heaven. The same principle echoed when the Kaaba was purified and rededicated to the One. Even the Psalms of David and the surahs of the Quran carry the same poetic rhythm: invocation and response, praise and surrender. The Quran describes itself as Musaddiqan, a confirmer, not an annihilator of revelation. It positions itself as the final algorithm of divine knowledge, integrating all previous instructions into one system of remembrance. In this light, Moses' tablets, David's psalms, and Jesus' words all find convergence in Muhammad's recitation. It is as if the divine had been writing one eternal book, but revealing it in stages through different prophets, languages, and epochs until the code was complete. Judaism preserved the law of God. Christianity unveiled the love of God. Islam restored the oneness of God. 3 notes, 1 melody, 3 lenses, 1 light. 4. The clash of memory and message. If the root was unity, why did division triumph? Because civilizations, like individuals, can forget their origin. And when they forget, they begin to worship their reflections. The Jews guarding the law with passion, sometimes mistook the vessel for the source. The Christians, proclaiming love and salvation, sometimes drifted into mystery over message. The Muslims, defending monotheism, sometimes hardened into form without the fragrance. Each became protective of their revelation, forgetting that revelation was meant to reveal, not restrict. The Quran speaks directly to this forgetfulness. It recounts the mistakes of the past not to condemn, but to remind. It honors the Torah and Gospel while unveiling their forgotten depths, restoring the vertical link between the human and the divine. In that restoration, Islam became a mirror in which both Judaism and Christianity could see their original reflection, not as rivals, but as elder siblings in the same divine lineage. 5. Civilizations Dialogue, from Jerusalem to Mecca. Civilization itself has been a canvas for this dialogue between revelations. Jerusalem and Mecca are not merely cities, they are symbols, two poles of divine consciousness. Jerusalem, the city of memory, law, and lineage, represents humanity's yearning to guard the sacred. It is the mind of faith seeking to remember. Mecca, the city of surrender, unity, and universality, represents humanity's longing to return to its source. It is the heart of faith, seeking to dissolve. When the Prophet Muhammad led his followers in prayer toward Jerusalem and later turned them toward Mecca, it was not just a change of direction, it was a symbolic reconciliation of history itself. The axis of revelation had turned, not away from the old, but toward the completion of the circle. The Kaaba thus became the New Jerusalem, a sanctuary open not to one tribe, but to all mankind. And in that act, the divine conversation between Isaac and Ishmael found its hidden peace. 6. The meeting point, the Abrahamic equation. At the heart of this grand dialogue lies a paradox. The more humanity divides, the more divine truth multiplies its reflections, ensuring it can never be lost. The Quran's insistence that we make no distinction between any of his messengers, 2:285, is not a theological courtesy, it is a metaphysical statement. It means that revelation is not a sequence of competitors, but a chorus of harmonies. The divine intelligence speaks through diversity, not despite it. Abraham's covenant thus lives on not in one faith, but in the intersections between them, where prayer resembles prayer, compassion mirrors compassion, and truth recognizes itself in another tongue. Every time a Jew recites the Shema, a Muslim the Shahada, and a Christian the Our Father, the heavens hear not three competing voices, but one ancient echo. There is no God but God. The secret is not in the words, but in the remembering. 7. The lost unity, awaiting recognition. Humanity stands now at a crossroads that Abraham foresaw, the age of knowledge without wisdom, of religion without revelation. The Torah's call to justice, the Gospel's call to mercy, and the Quran's call to truth all echo across the same ravaged landscape, awaiting rediscovery. The hidden connection between Islam and Judaism, and by extension, all revelation, is not meant to erase differences, but to unveil their divine purpose, that the one could be known through the many. The Quran's final message, "This day I have perfected for you your religion and completed my favor upon you," 5:3, was not a claim of supremacy, but of synthesis. It was the closing of a circle that began in Abraham's tent. And perhaps that is the secret he carried. The secret divided. That truth cannot be contained in one nation, one scripture, or one time. It must move through history like breath, inhaled and exhaled, lost and found, until all recognize that what they seek has always been one. Epilogue, the whisper of the covenant. The story of Isaac and Ishmael is not finished. It continues in every heart torn between division and unity, between form and essence, between law and love. It continues every time a believer looks beyond their text to see the face of another believer and feels, even for a moment, that they are brothers. That is Abraham's secret, buried not in the sands of Arabia or the stones of Jerusalem, but in the human soul itself. And until that secret is remembered, truly remembered, the world will keep circling around the same sacred Kaaba of misunderstanding, searching for what was never lost. The reunion of faiths, rediscovering Abraham's forgotten legacy. There comes a time in the life of every civilization when its stories begin to decay, when myths that once united the world begin to rot under the weight of power and pride. The sons of Abraham have long carried one such story, not of a single man, but of a light that traveled through his descendants, like an ancient current flowing through three rivers, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Yet as the rivers widened, they forgot that they were born of the same spring. Each began to believe the water belonged to them alone. And so the world fractured, not because the truth changed, but because humanity could not bear its unity. The story of Abraham is not the past. It is the mirror. The divisions that split his sons are the same that split the human heart, between intellect and spirit, self and other, pride and surrender. The reunion of faith begins not in synagogues or mosques, not in councils or debates, but within the invisible sanctuary where the soul remembers its first covenant. Am I not your Lord? And it whispers again, as it once did before time. Yes, you are. To rediscover Abraham's forgotten legacy is to peel back the layers of history and see that every revelation is a continuation of one voice. The voice of the eternal speaking through the language of human limitation. Abraham's greatness was not that he founded a religion, but that he transcended them all. He was a man of silence, standing between heaven and earth, surrendering to a call that no one else could hear. Before scripture, before priesthood, before any law or lineage, there was a trembling man beneath the stars and a voice that said, "Submit." That submission, Islam in its purest universal sense, is the thread that binds all prophets. Moses submitted when he accepted the burden of law. Jesus submitted when he forgave those who crucified him. Muhammad submitted when he carried revelation into a world of disbelief. Every prophet was a mirror of the same light refracted through the prism of time. The Torah gave humanity the structure to live. The gospel gave it the heart to feel. The Quran gave it the balance to remember. The divine plan was not a replacement of revelations, but a symphony, each faith a different movement in the same celestial composition. Yet humanity, ever fragile, mistook harmony for hierarchy. The followers of each prophet began to believe that the final note of their song erased all the others. They built walls of doctrine where there should have been bridges of remembrance. They guarded the outer shell of revelation and forgot the living fire within it. But the heart of the Quran, like the heart of the Torah and the Gospel, beats with the same unyielding truth. Indeed, those who believe, and those who are Jews and the Christians and the Sabians, whoever believes in God in the last day and does righteousness, shall have their reward with their Lord, and they will have no fear, nor will they grieve. The reunion of faiths begins with this verse, because it unites what centuries of blood have divided. It whispers to every seeker. Faith was never a competition. It was always a remembering. For Abraham, faith was not a name, but a direction. The Quran calls him Hanif, one who turns away from falsehood and inclines toward truth. His was the religion of the heart's orientation, not of its title. He did not argue theology. He walked into the desert and listened. He broke the idols not only of his people, but of the human mind, the illusions of control, the pride of lineage, the arrogance of certainty. To rediscover his legacy is to rediscover the courage to unlearn what divides us and to remember what first called us home. Somewhere beneath the rubble of empires and centuries of interpretation lies the original essence of revelation, the language of sincerity. When God spoke to Abraham, there were no intermediaries, no scholars, no systems. There was only the trembling heart of a human being and the infinite compassion of the Creator. That was the first prayer, pure, unadorned, and without borders. To return to that moment is the purpose of every faith. The law came later, the rituals after, the debates much later still. The essence has never changed. A soul that bows in truth is already home. But how can this truth heal a world as fragmented as ours? Perhaps by remembering that unity does not mean sameness. The reunion of faiths is not the melting of differences into uniformity. It is the realization that difference itself is a divine mercy. Just as light needs shadow to reveal its brilliance, revelation needed diversity to express its fullness. Each faith preserved what the others might have forgotten. The Torah preserved law. The Gospel preserved love. The Quran preserved balance. The world needs all three as the human being needs body, heart, and spirit. If one dominates, the soul collapses into imbalance. Law without love becomes tyranny. Love without law becomes chaos. Faith without reflection becomes blindness. The reunion Abraham dreamed of is not the merging of religions into one, but the awakening of the heart to the one that beats within them all. The world today stands again in Abraham's desert, surrounded by idols of our own making, technology, materialism, nationalism. We have built civilizations of steel, but hearts of sand. We know how to measure the distance between stars, but not the distance between our souls. We have mastered the laws of nature, but forgotten the law of compassion. The reunion must begin not between nations, but between the fragmented parts of ourselves. For the external divisions of faith mirror the internal divisions of the human being. The ego says, my truth. The soul says, the truth. And between these two voices lies the battlefield of history. Abraham's forgotten legacy is not merely about lineage. It is about the reconciliation of these two voices. When the ego bows to the soul, when intellect surrenders to wisdom, when will aligns with the divine will, then the ancient covenant is fulfilled. In that surrender, the Jew, the Christian, and the Muslim are not three separate seekers, but one humanity kneeling before the same light. Even now, echoes of this remembrance ripple across the earth. In Jerusalem, the stones whisper the prayers of prophets who once walked the same streets. In Mecca, the Kaaba, built by Abraham and Ishmael, still draws hearts from every race and language to turn in one motion around the axis of the divine. In monasteries and mosques, in the silence of synagogues, in the solitude of the desert, the same longing burns, the longing to return. It is this longing that proves the unity has never been lost, only forgotten. When the Quran speaks of humanity as one soul divided and sent forth into nations and tribes, so that you may know one another, it reminds us that diversity was never punishment, but pedagogy. We were scattered so that we might learn to see the one in the many. But knowledge without remembrance becomes arrogance. Civilization without transcendence becomes exile. The reunion of faiths, therefore, is also the reunion of knowledge and wisdom. The intellect's recognition of what the heart has always known. And perhaps beyond theology, there is a deeper prophecy hidden in this vision, that at the end of time, when humanity stands weary from the wars of belief, it will rediscover the simplicity that began it all, not through new revelation, but through collective realization. The Abrahamic spirit, pure surrender to the divine, will reawaken as the last light of unity before the dawn of judgment. That light does not belong to any nation, any people, or any book alone. It belongs to the timeless covenant written in every soul. When one human heart awakens to it, the lineage of Abraham continues. When many awaken, the world itself begins to heal. The reunion of faith is not the end of religion, but its fulfillment. It is the moment when prayer ceases to be a transaction and becomes a state of being. When to live with awareness, compassion, and humility is itself worship. It is the day when a Christian can see in a Muslim's bow the same love he feels at the cross. When a Jew can recognize in the Muslim's remembrance the same awe that filled Moses at Sinai. When a Muslim can read the Psalms and feel the same divine fire that burned in David's song. The reunion is not theoretical. It is already unfolding, quietly, humbly, beneath the noise of history. Every act of kindness that transcends creed is a verse of that reunion. Every moment of genuine empathy is revelation renewed. Every time one soul recognizes another, not by their label, but by their light, the covenant of Abraham breathes again. This is the secret he left behind, that unity cannot be decreed, it must be embodied. When the human heart becomes the meeting place of opposites, of law and love, of reason and revelation, of self and surrender, it becomes the true temple. The Kaaba is but a symbol of this inner axis. To circumambulate the heart is the final pilgrimage. There, every faith meets. There, Abraham's legacy is not history but heartbeat. And when humanity learns to live from that place, the world itself will change. The wars of religion will end not because one side wins, but because all sides remember what they were fighting for, to return to the one they already belong to. Perhaps in that hour the children of Isaac and Ishmael will stand side by side once more, not as rivals but as reflections of the same promise. Perhaps the priest, the rabbi, and the imam will speak not in debate but in harmony. Perhaps the earth, weary of human arrogance, will finally feel the weight of gratitude again. For the truth has always been simple. There is no them. There is only us, and above us, around us, within us, Him. This is the reunion of faiths, the awakening of the ancient unity beneath modern chaos, the rediscovery of the eternal beneath the temporary, the remembrance that we were one before we were many. And so, the story that began under the stars with a single man whispering into the silence ends as it began, with the same whisper returning to the heavens. My Lord, make me one who submits to you, and from my descendants a community that submits to you. In that prayer, all faiths find their home. In that submission, the rivers of revelation flow back into the same ocean. And when humanity remembers this, when the heart of the world finally bows in unison, the light of Abraham will rise again, not as history, but as destiny. The reunion is not coming, it has already begun, quietly within every heart that dares to remember.